September Storytime, welcome.
Thank you.
We've obviously got some strange sports and competitions and surreal things as our general sort of theme. So those are two of our main topics today: the strange sports and competitions and things that seem surreal, but may or may not actually be real things. So we've got great Alice in Wonderlands and sporting dress-ups and so forth. Things to go with your surreal things.
Top and shorts.
It's
also just good. What I wear when I'm around the home, but you know.
Yeah.
And
very cool. And Tim's household, do you want to point out some of your things? Because that's a great shot. I might actually just full screen you so we can see all of that.
We're on the surreal end of things, and we're from Alice in Wonderland. And I'm like the sort of person who's likely to say, off with their heads. And we've got the croquet game, oops, the hedgehog.
There we go.
And the flamingos as our mallets and our playing card subject.
I don't need it.
It's very good. And of course, the flamingo croquet is a strange sport as well. So
yeah.
Everything.
You hit the hedgehog and I just got a shot going through the hoop.
That's a real mark.
And down here, you can't see them properly, so there's a sheepdog trial going on as well.
Oh, yeah. I see. Yeah, there are some doggies. Oh, there are some doggies in the story. So,
and he's also got
right.
He's also got one of these things for playing, Quidditch.
Because we thought it looked a bit like Shamrock in that Father Ted.
Oh yes, sweep ball we called it, didn't we? Made up Father Ted. Well, I set out to dress as close as I could to the people doing that caber toss thing in Dad's video. Unfortunately, I don't have a kilt, so I've just gone with the black skirt and the socks that come up my knee. And then what I found really interesting about them is that they were wearing their kilts, but on the top they had basically soccer jersey type polo shirts. So I've just, got my closest approximation of that. But I'm wearing my helmet because if you are going to try any strange sports at home, I think helmets are a pretty good idea. Having recently seen a helmet that had been hit in my household and how effective they are. So wear your helmets.
Wait. Oh God, where's our helmets, Barry?
The King and Queen of Hearts got to wear their helmets too. Yeah, because it's very dangerous doing off with your head. You might, the head might go flying and hit your head.
Yeah.
Our other topics were unexpected turn up of money, DIY security systems, birthday planning. I had a request for some increased diversity in the character cast. I've brought back in Outside Coming Inside, which is one from a little while ago, but I felt that it could be done a bit more. And I had the interesting experience on Facebook a little while ago of seeing a video of someone with a police cat. And I thought this would go rather well with some of the dog things that are in this story. So I decided to try and include a police cat in this one. But a silly little poem to start us off, which is called Relative. Some things out of this world are right in it. Never say can't when you could have said bring it. But that's not to say to go out of your way if you could have had help from a friend to begin it. Some things are real, even though you can't see them. Truth can exist that is only in feeling. And even if you spent your whole life out there would still be things of which you weren't aware. So learn what you can of things you can do. And remember, that's only how life seems to you.
Very good.
This story is called Smelling is Believing.
Smelling. Okay, got it.
Did you know there's a type of arachnid that has daddy long legs body, but a head that looks like a rabbit's? Asked Chad while he was pouring the tea. Adele laughed at him. I don't believe you, Chad. Seeing is believing. This was one of their private jokes. Under the table, Adele's new guide dog, Seb, flicked his ears as though he too thought Chad was making up tall tales. Seb definitely did think Chad was making things up, if anyone had asked him. He thought Chad was a very suspicious human in general. Back when Seb was only a student guide dog, he'd been to an event in this very town and attended training with some local dogs, and everybody there had been spying on Chad, who was the mayor here, certain he was up to something. When Seb discovered that the human he was going to help lived in Trottsam, he'd been very excited to spy on Chad too. But as it turned out, Seb's partner human was good friends with Chad the mayor, and Seb felt obliged to behave in a less spy-like way than he would have liked. Still, they couldn't stop him from sniffing under all the furniture while Adele was safely seated at the table. Seb, I can hear you sniffing the bookcase again, called Adele immediately, sharp-eared as ever. You're not supposed to roam around other people's houses, are you? Remarked Seb, returning to lie obediently at her feet. As if Chad's place counted as other people's houses. Adele was over here all the time. I started planning the Haymakers festival this week with the council, Chad was telling Adele. I was thinking after my Scotland travels, I might throw in a few Highland Games type of events. Adele put out a hand to find the biscuit plate and picked up 2 biscuits for good measure, to increase the chances that one of them was fudge chopped chip. Will you have that contest where people throw the big poles? Caber tossing, said Chad, a note of surprise in his voice. Yeah, of course. How'd you know about that? Adele crunched a biscuit. Ginger, bummer. When I was a kid and I could see a bit more, he was on telly one time. Oh, so you believe in it then? Asked Chad with a wry chuckle. Yep. Adele didn't elaborate, too busy with the second biscuit, which was fudge chopped chip, and her mocha, which came from Chad's coffee machine and was excellent. I don't know if I'll be able to get many competitors for it though, Chad mused. Don't reckon the locals here would be much good at it. He slid his mug across the table with a screech and dunked a biscuit in his cappuccino with a plop. I reckon I'd be good at it, Adele told him. There was a small silence in which Adele surmised that Chad was looking surprised and wondering how to respond. She decided to save him the trouble. I'm really strong. I do weights, and I'm good at balancing things because I have to do loads of stuff one-handed when I have Seb or a cane with me. She paused to drink more mocha. We could teach Seb to navigate the field, right, Seb? Seb wasn't sure what was going on, but his name kept getting mentioned and Adele seemed excited, so he said, wah, enthusiastically, and hung his tongue out at Chad. All right then, Chad answered. I guess that's settled. First competitor for the caber toss, confirmed. Now I just have to convince some other locals to give it a go with you. A bit of a road trip away, Kasey was trying to plan her birthday celebrations. The difficulty being, neither her part-time work as a personal trainer nor her new floristry apprenticeship were very well paid. And this month there really didn't look like being much in the way of spare funds available for birthday festivities. A picnic at the sunflower fields was her best idea so far, but would Pan come out from the city for that? And would Jay be willing to do an activity he'd have to wear sunblock for? Kasey sighed. What shall we do, Spanner? She asked the Labrador she'd accidentally adopted last year. Kasey's cat, Lolly, jumped up onto the windowsill where Kasey was gazing out at the wild field of her backyard and glared. Oh, Lolly, Kasey huffed, stroking the cat's soft tortoiseshell back. I didn't mean to exclude you. It's just that you probably wouldn't really like to come on a picnic, would you? Just then, someone rapped at Kasey's front door. The big brass knocker she'd installed, creaking and tapping 4 times in quick succession. It was a business-like knock, the sort that official people did. Kasey froze for a moment, searching mentally for any recent plant thefts or accidental trespassing in her memory. Unable to think of anything, she went warily to the door and opened it to find a familiar face with unruly brown curls on the doorstep. Jamie! She laughed, bouncing forward and hugging the man before she thought about it. I wondered if you'd ever come back to see me. Jamie was how Kasey had ended up becoming the new and inexperienced dog parent of failed guide dog Spanner the previous summer. Speaking of which, Kasey frowned at Jamie, who seemed to be far more stable and less entangled by leashes than usual. No puppies? She asked, surprised. Jamie spread his arms out so that Kasey could see how lead-free he was. No, it's strange. I feel sort of naked. Kasey opted to let the opportunity for inappropriate comments slide. Why not? She got out of the doorway, suddenly aware that she was hovering on the threshold. Come in, come in. Spanner charged at Jamie and jumped up excitedly, licking Jamie's face. Spanner, get down right now. Have you forgotten all your manners? Jamie pushed the dog down and kneeled on the floor to pat his ex-pupil's ears. Seb, Sonny and Sandy have all started full-time work now, Jamie explained, talking as much to Spanner as to Kasey. I'm having a short break before I take on any new charges. Kasey, who was a country person now, automatically put the kettle on. Wow, it's a bit strange seeing you without any dogs in tow. Jamie smiled. He looked a bit lost, Kasey thought, not unlike the time she'd first met him. Well, he began, seeming a bit nervous. I was wondering, do you still work as a personal trainer? Kasey grimaced a bit internally. Not just a social visit then. Yeah, I do that part-time. Why? Jamie sat back on the floor, still scratching Spanner's ears, and accepted a cup of tea. I might have a sort of special mission for you. Have you ever heard of a sport called the caber toss? Back at their own house, Adele and Seb were doing some sweeping together, while a Tupperware dish of pasta heated up in the microwave. Seb liked the sweeping because it was complicated. He got to pick up lots of things like slippers and mats and move them out of the way, and then put them back exactly right so that Adele wouldn't trip over things left in the wrong places. Adele usually talked to Seb a lot during the sweeping too. Some of it was commands, but Seb knew the routine now, so he didn't really need to listen to those. He didn't know what all the other things were that she said, but he liked being talked to anyway. I don't know, Seb, Adele was saying to him as they made their way in a spiral round the open plan living room. You cost quite a bit, you know. I'm not sure getting a personal trainer as well right now is a good idea. Jamie did seem very excited though. Seb used his nose on the handle to open the back door, and Adele swept out all the bits of outside that had somehow got inside. Seb didn't understand why it was a problem if things from outside came in. As far as he was concerned, inside was much more interesting if there were a few leaves and insects and feathers and things. But he understood that for some reason, humans didn't like this, so he helped Adele get them out of the house anyway. Sometimes, though, he did bring a few things back in from the yard on purpose, like nice smelly pieces of bark or horse poos from the road at the front. He always made sure to put these trinkets up on the windowsills, where they wouldn't make Adele slip over by getting in her way. Seb thought this made him pretty good at his job. Adele was still talking about the possible personal trainer while Seb's mind wandered to all the outside things that he liked to bring in. The other trouble is, Seb, we don't know this personal trainer person. So that means I'll have to do meeting new people. You know how I hate introductions. Seb didn't really know, but he liked being told about it. So he nudged Adele's hand for a pat. Adele reached out and shut the back door, found the key and locked it, and then put in place her DIY security system, which was a rope that went across the doorway and attached to some pots and pans strung together on the other end. The pots clattered and banged as Adele looped the rope over a hook that Albert next door had installed for her, just like they would clatter and bang if anyone opened the back door in the night. Albert next door wanted Adele to use his DIY security system, but Adele had been unconvinced so far, which was reasonable, considering that Albert's security system was recordings of cat noises that came on as you went in his doors or opened his windows. To Albert, this seemed logical, because Albert was a policeman and his cat, Roger, was a police cat. When Albert had first introduced Roger the cat as a police cat, Adele had responded with the same disdain she offered Mayor Chad's tales of strange creatures and surreal places. However, she had since heard and felt Roger the police cat out and about with Albert, and other locals had told tales of Roger helping with police inquiries that did seem quite convincing. Nonetheless, to anyone who wasn't in the know about Roger, Adele couldn't imagine cat noises being much of a deterrent to burglary, so she continued to decline Albert's offers to install the same system at her house. Adele went through to her kitchen, got the oven mitts from their hook by the door, and took the pasta from the microwave to the table. Her house was a lot more organised than most people's she knew, which was essential and also nice to feel proud about sometimes. She opened the fridge and reached for where her shaker of Parmesan cheese should be. It wasn't there. Instead, there was some sort of roll-shaped item which felt like it was fastened with 2 rubber bands. Adele pulled it out. "What's this, Seb?" she asked. "Where's the cheese?" Seb wasn't sure what it was. It smelt like a lot of people had touched it. He knew the word cheese, though, and he could smell cheese on the lower shelf, so he stuck his head in the fridge door and got Adele the cylinder that smelt of cheese. "Brr," he told her, nudging her hand with it. Adele put the mystery object on the table and took the cheese from Seb. "Good boy." She found her chair and sat down. "I wonder why it wasn't in the right shelf. Someone must have been in our fridge, Seb. You'll have to be on extra guard duty tonight." Kasey, somewhat against her better judgment, had made Jamie a stir-fry and was being told about caber tossing. Jamie was doing his best to get the details right as he relayed secondhand the description of the competition given to him by Chad the Mayor. Spanner was drooling on Jamie's shoe, and Lolly the cat was watching the whole scene from the top of the bookcase, unimpressed at the return of a human who, in her experience, usually brought a completely unreasonable quantity of dogs with him. So she has to balance this huge pole and also keep her balance moving forward and then throw the thing so it flips over in a straight line, Kasey asked, waddling around the lounge room in demonstration, slightly incredulous. Not to be discouraging, but at yoga, they sometimes make us stand on one leg and shut our eyes. And I still fall over even if I keep both feet on the ground. Balance is hard. Jamie nodded. "I know, but you learnt to balance with your eyes open. When you see Adele move around, you'll get it." The main challenge I expect will be for her to learn the correct technique for the throw, which is where I think you'll be able to help, because you're used to describing different motions and grips and things. Does that make sense? Kasey nodded, thoughtful. It seemed she wouldn't have to work out what to do for her birthday weekend after all. Small problem, she told Jamie. My personal trainer fees won't exactly cover staying in a B&B or the petrol to commute back and forth while I work with Adele, and I have pretty much no money right now. Replied Jamie. Maybe Chad the Mayor has some spare funds in the fair's budget. He really wants to run this caber toss event. Kasey gave him an incredulous look. What, the dodgy mayor who everyone in Trottsam is spying on? Just then, though, Spanner must have heard a noise outside, because he suddenly leapt to his feet and started barking, causing Lolly to hiss with arched back and patchwork fur on end, and leap down from the bookcase onto the windowsill, where she dislodged a slate tile that fell dramatically to the floor and shattered. After jumping out of their skins, the human occupants of the room got up, and Kasey went to get the dustpan and broom for the shards of slate. When she came back, Jamie was looking in astonishment at her windowsill. Either you've been lying to me, he said, or you're about to discover this house's hidden treasure. Huh? Mumbled Kasey, going around Spanner, who was still being agitated in the middle of the room, to see. Jamie pointed to the spot where the slate tile had been. There, sitting in a dusty indent amongst the grout, was a stack of $50 notes. What? Kasey spluttered. I wouldn't complain if I were you, laughed Jamie. I guess I can travel up to train Adele after all, breathed Kasey, shaking her head. At Adele's house, a weirdly similar chain of events was unfolding. Weird enough that you might say it couldn't be a coincidence, or if it was, it must not be true. Yet true it was that while Jamie and Kasey were discovering that the previous inhabitants of Kasey's cottage had used their windowsill tiles as a bank, Albert from next door was over at Adele's house, trying to remain calm while he informed her that the object she was asking him about from her refrigerator was a roll of $50 notes. Are you sure? Adele asked him, running her thumb around the roll to find the papery ends of the notes and frowning. Are they counterfeit? Albert took the roll from Adele's hand and began holding the notes up to the light. I don't think so, he replied, and I've seen a few counterfeit notes in my time. Well, said Adele, patting Seb's head, I guess we can get the personal trainer after all. Albert tusked and looked at police cat Roger, who was sitting on Adele's table. I think you must have Robin Hood breaking in, Adele. Perhaps you really don't need a Roger alarm. Adele smiled. It's all right, Albert. Seb will soon let you know if Robin Hood comes back when we're at home. So it happened that a few days later, Jamie returned to Trottsam with Kasey and Spanner in tow. Lolly, much to her disgust, had been left in the care of Joan next door, who was drowning in scones on account of Kasey being away, and kept trying to placate the cat with whipped cream, which Lolly was trying very hard to pretend wasn't working. Jamie had forgotten to mention to Adele that Kasey had a dog who had in fact been raised with Seb. So he was now apologising profusely for the shock of Seb suddenly leaping up and down on the spot in the driveway. Seb had got himself under control now and remembered that as he was working, he shouldn't be showing his excitement outwardly. Spanner was unimpressed. He eyed Seb with a scathing gaze that meant, "Since when did you get so tame?" Seb tried not to let it bother him, and stood very straight and neat by Adele's side in an attempt to convey to Spanner that his work was important and he was proud of it. The humans, meanwhile, were being introduced by Jamie. Adele thought that one of the better things about not being able to see people when you met them was that you didn't have to see their reaction to you. All you could do was say hello and smile and hope they were smiling too. It meant she never had to see anyone do that face that meant, I don't think you look like an Adele.
Okay.
On the other hand, one of the worst things about not being able to see people was not being able to see their reaction to you. It meant that even if they didn't do any double takes or uncertain expressions, you could always imagine that they did. And that was why Adele hated introductions. She'd told Seb all this the night before, while they sat by the radio, that Seb wouldn't have understood, even if he knew all the words, because Seb was a dog, and dogs didn't have these kind of social issues, or so Adele thought. Seb was, in fact, at that moment in time, not speaking to Spanner, because Spanner clearly wanted to make a fool of him, having failed to gain his own qualifications, and therefore, Seb surmised, being jealous. Spanner was pretending he wasn't with any of them, and felt strongly that he'd been brought here to rub it in. On the whole, the humans were getting along much better at that moment than they thought. Kasey, who had immediately shaken hands with Adele, greeted her by saying, "Excellent, I can tell you already do weights. This should just be a matter of learning some technique." And Adele grinned and said, "Thanks for agreeing to train me." And with that, introductions were over and training began. They all went down to the Oval that afternoon to work out a few basic technique issues that had everyone slightly stumped. Mayor Chad joined them and would be explaining the rules and correct technique as the only one who had actually been at a caber toss in person before. They discovered on arrival that he'd also had the foresight to cordon off an area for their practice, avoiding the potential health and safety risks of hurling a pole around in a space that was open to the public. The humans thought this very sensible. To Spanner and Seb, on the other hand, it looked an awful lot like a test arena, and Spanner hid behind Kasey's legs, lest the whole trip turn out to be a retest set up especially for him. The first challenge was a practical one for Jamie to ponder. How was Adele supposed to hold on to Seb and follow his guidance, whilst also holding a 20-foot pole in both hands? "He could be attached to my belt," suggested Adele, trying to imagine being directed by the waist. In practice, though, this meant that Seb's movements had an effect on Adele's centre of gravity, which made it pretty much impossible for her to pay any attention to how Kasey wanted her to distribute the pole's weight, and resulted in multiple human-dog pile-ups, and the others having to grab the pole. After the fourth such incident, everybody was on the ground, tired and discouraged, except for Spanner, who was clambering all over everyone with his tail wagging and clearly thought it was all very funny. Seb gave him the look that teachers give children who have just spilt glue in the Lego box during free play for the 10th time. Then Spanner sat down, tired from being overtly ridiculous, and spotted tiny human waddling across the grass with their parent human joined to the larger human with a kind of leash arrangement that left both of their hands free. It seemed to Spanner that this was similar to what Seb and Adele were trying to achieve, and being a Labrador, Spanner forgot that he was supposed to be annoyed with Seb and remarked loudly, "Woof!" "Shut up, Spanner," sighed Kasey, who was exasperated that she hadn't yet been able to offer much help. "Woof!" exclaimed Spanner, put out, but still excited. Seb finally stopped resting his head on his paws and looked to see what Spanner's fuss was about. "What?" he exclaimed, catching sight of the joined humans. "What?" spat Jamie, turning around. Then, "Oh, Kasey, look." He turned to Chad. "Do you think you could ask to borrow that? You're the mayor after all." "What is it?" demanded Adele. After the double-ended harness revelation, there were a few more issues to work out, such as where should Seb be in order to avoid being hit with the pole? And where did Seb need to lead for Adele to move and throw in a nice straight line? But gradually, Kasey was able to contribute more insights into how Adele should use her strength, and Seb began to understand what he needed to do. By the end of the evening, Adele had successfully tossed the caber in a sufficiently correct fashion that it did land directly in front of her, if not flipped over as it was expected to be. And Seb was starting to find this strange game of human reverse fetch quite fun. Spanner had remembered that he was supposed to be put out and was not walking near Seb on the way back to town. But secretly, he did feel a little bit proud of his training mate. At the town's main B&B, the owner, Sandy, excitedly told Jamie and Kasey the big news, which was that Big Tess, the town's largest tractor and main tourist attraction, was expected to actually drive and to take part in the slow tractor race that took place at the fair each year. Slow tractor race, Kasey repeated, uncertain. Kasey, sighed Jamie. Are you a country person now or not? The tractors have to go as slow as they can while continuously moving forward from the starting line, and the winner is the one that crosses the line last. Their host, Sandy, nodded seriously. A real challenge for a machine as big as Tess, she told them. She'll be lucky to avoid coming dead first. Meanwhile, Adele was back at Chad's, sharing a cheese platter, and Chad was on his latest wild description rant. In Venezuela, there's this place called Montramira, and it's basically like, right, this huge hill that's almost a perfect cube. Adele could tell from the air movement and shifting light that Chad was waving his hands about wildly as he described this, even though he knew she couldn't see his gesturing. She smiled fondly at his enthusiasm. And, Chad continued, all around the edge it has waterfalls pouring down off of it. And in the US, in Nevada, there's this place called the Fly Geyser. And it's like in a kid's picture book when they have a castle with loads of turrets sticking up. Can you imagine that? Sort of, said Adele, thinking of a fairy book she'd had when she was little. Okay, but it's not man-made. It's a rock formation. And every single one of the upward pointing rocks has got water spouting out like a fountain. Adele smirked. Chad, she said. You don't believe me? No. I swear it's true, Chad began. But just then, Seb let out a bark and suddenly ran for the hallway. Adele could hear his claws skitter off across Chad's tiled floor. Where's he going? She asked, concerned. Seb, what are you doing? Chad's chair scraped backwards against the tiles. I'll go and check, he said. You want to come? Adele stood up and grabbed Chad's shoulder, and they followed Seb down the hall and into the spare bedroom. Ow! Adele heard from in front of Chad. Chad, she said, laughing. Did Albert install his special burglar alarm on your place? No, Chad answered, sounding rattled. That's not a recording of Roger. Roger's in here. Adele moved around alongside Chad. Really? Albert, are you here somewhere? What are you doing in Chad's house? There was a rattle from the window. Albert's at my window on a ladder, spluttered Chad. They all spy on you, Chad, Adele told him in resigned tones. I keep telling you. It's amazing what people will say in front of me at the bus stop, as though they think I can't hear either. Chad creaked the window further open, which was evidently barely ajar enough for Roger to have got in. What do you think you're doing? He demanded of Albert. How dare you spy on the mayor? Albert shuffled about, making rickety noises on the ladder. Adele imagined that he was probably trying to draw himself up to his full height whilst precariously balanced. This is police work, Albert declared. The contents of that drawer, he paused and presumably pointed, is illegally imported cat treats. You cannot bring cat treats into Australia without an import permit. They're not imported, Chad exclaimed. I just got them down at the Foodland. While he was saying this, Adele very carefully manoeuvred towards the faint sounds of Roger moving about investigating the drawer. She reached down, picked up a packet, and opened it. Let me smell, she said, and sniffed at the bag. Oh yeah, these are just the same ones you get for Roger, Albert. He's probably just sniffed them out because he likes them. Didn't you think of that? She pretended to fumble the bag and let it fall from her grip, spilling the treats across the floor. Seb and Roger swept in immediately and devoured the evidence. Oh, clumsy me. Sorry, Chad. She directed her voice to the window. Never mind, Albert. An easy mistake to make when working with a cat, huh? Nothing to worry about here, though. I've never seen anything suspicious at this house in all my time in Trottsam. I'd be sure to tell you if I did, of course. Albert harumphed. Right-o then. Lucky that. Council probably wouldn't let Chad run the fair if he had a criminal offence on record, and we're all very much looking forward to the event. There were a few creaks as he moved back down the ladder a bit. Come on, Roger. A patter of paws indicated that Roger had finished his share of the treats and was vacating the premises. Adele closed the drawer. As she did so, her fingers brushed against something else inside, which felt a little bit like the object from her fridge, only bigger. She smiled, but didn't say anything. So, Chad, she inquired, as Seb, now much calmer, led the way back to the living room. Why do you have cat treats when you haven't got a cat? That, replied Chad, is a long story, and you'd just say that you don't believe me anyway. That's probably true, Adele admitted, grinning. In what seemed like a very short time, the day of the Trottsam Haymakers festival arrived. Adele and Seb both felt rather nervous. Chad had only found them a small group of rival competitors, but it wouldn't do to make fools of themselves after the effort they'd made to prepare. Kasey tried to keep them occupied by commentating on the slow tractor race, an event which, it turned out, was very difficult to describe. Tess is winning. No, wait, she's losing. Oh dear, this is confusing. Now I'm making poems. Oh gosh, she's slowing down a bit now. You know what? I think she's going to do okay. There was a huge eruption of cheering from the crowd around them. Spanner trod on everyone's feet, and Kasey didn't have to elaborate on what had happened because all the locals started chanting, Big Tess, Big Tess. In no time at all, however, things went still again. Big Tess safely parked at one side of the oval to preside over the rest of the proceedings, and it was time for Adele and Seb to take the field. Seb could see Spanner in the corner of his vision as he walked Adele to the starting mark and hoped there wouldn't be any heckling from that direction. He lined Adele up, and some unfamiliar humans came onto the field to give Adele the giant stick. Seb looked for Jamie in the crowd. Come on, Seb, said Jamie under his breath. Don't get jumpy. Kasey held Jamie's hand. Spanner put his head between Kasey's knees and stuck his nose through the fence. Chad blew his whistle. Seb turned back to face ahead. He trotted forward a few paces and stopped sharply, just as he'd been taught. Adele sent the big stick flying into the air, just as she'd been taught, or at least Seb thought so. He wasn't quite sure what the goal was meant to be. But Adele said he was a good boy, and Jamie and Kasey and the other humans were making a lot of noise, so he guessed they'd done well. They had to repeat the exercise a few times, though, which concerned Seb at first. But since the humans cheered louder each time, it must have been good. Afterwards, Adele leaned down to him and said, "We're the champs, Seb," of which Seb only understood his name. But she seemed very happy, so he was happy too. Adele and Seb walked off the field, both grinning, and Kasey, Jamie and Chad met them at the fence. "What a tosser!" yelled Kasey, patting Adele on the back, and everyone laughed. "Yeah, she's our tosser," Chad told them, putting an arm around her. "Well, I say," Jamie said, kneeling down to Seb, "what a team, huh?" He ruffled Seb's head fur. Spanner climbed over Jamie and bumped sideways into Seb, which was annoying for Adele, who said, "Oi!" But Seb knew that it meant Spanner thought he was cool after all. They watched the final event of the day, which was something called the sheaf toss, in which Chad explained that the competitors were trying to throw a heavy bundle of hay over an increasingly high bar with a pitchfork. Kasey corroborated this description so that Adele would believe Chad and not add it to his list of absurd stories. "Kasey," Adele remarked, "what do you reckon about me trying that next year?" Kasey thought it ought to be possible, and with that they all retired to Adele's house for champagne, with the exception of Seb and Spanner, who were giving chops instead. Chad began to regale them with a tale about a giant waterworm which glowed in the dark, but he stopped suddenly mid-sentence. "Adele," he said from over near the window, "is there a reason why there might be feathers and sticks and horse poos on your windowsill?" Adele hesitated. "I guess you don't believe me that they're here," sighed Chad. "Come over and feel." "No, yuck," exclaimed Kasey. "Don't feel horse poos." "Actually," sighed Adele, "I do believe you." "Really?" asked Chad. "Yeah," answered Adele. "Smelling is believing too. And I've been wondering where that smell was coming from." "Oh, Seb," groaned Jamie. "It's all right," Adele told him. "We can forgive the caber tossing champion dog for a few horse poos." Kasey thought that both the dogs in the room seemed to be snickering, but really Seb was just grinning, and Spanner was grinning right back. Seb definitely was still cool after all. They were all still a pack when they had the chance, and Seb was both a champion and a rogue, because aren't we all?
Oh, very. Yeah. Well done. Cute. Has anyone else seen pictures of the caber tossers?
Yeah, I think Dad sent that video to the Hangouts chat, but I might send it to the Facebook Messenger one as well, so that everyone can watch the people doing the caber toss, because it's.
We could have a zoo in the next.
A zoo? Okay, have a zoo.
Yeah. At the zoo, the naughty things people do that they're not meant to do.
Oh yeah, like pat the wombat.
People do things they definitely shouldn't do. Breaking the rules.
I'd actually pat the dingoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're the kind of person I'm thinking about, Shana.
But they're just like pet dogs. Like they just like put Adam and
They do look a bit like kelpies.
Don't feel.
I think Andrew had a strange sport. Did you, Andrew?
Oh, I'm sending you a text. I'm sending you a text of it as well.
Okay.
It's frisbee golf. We used to play at school.
Oh.
Another one was kick golf, where you kick the golf ball around the course instead of hit it. And
that sounds
throw
good, actually.
golf, where you throw the golf ball instead of hit it.
Oh.
All to promote the game in as less shots per hole as possible.
Yeah.
And every buggy had serious, copious amounts of alcohol.
Oh dear. So you get worse at it as you go along then.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
I like the frisbee golf.
Like a slow tractor race.
What did they use for the hole equivalent for the frisbee? Is it just a bigger hole or a hoop?
Hoops.
But actually, another if you count it as a sport, I read a book in the past week about the memory competitions and the memory Olympics.
Oh.
You guys heard of that?
No. Well, maybe I have, but I've forgotten because I'd be a terrible competitor.
Yeah. So there are in a lot of countries around the world, but it's particularly big in America and some European countries, memory Olympics and competitions where the events are things like memorizing the order of a shuffled deck of cards. And they'll do it in like 3 minutes. They'll go through and then they'll be able to 10 minutes later go back and tell you the order of them all. Or digits, like binary numbers, like the 1001, things like that. As many of those, they'll have a whole sheet of them and trying to remember as many of them as you can.
Oh my God.
So,
I'll be terrible at it.
Wow.
You learn particular techniques where you learn to use your visuospatial part of your brain for remembering facts instead of the part we normally do.
Yeah. Remembering it more like an image of what was on the page rather than...
They create images and stuff. And so it's kind of like they're learning to do what some people who have synesthesia naturally do in some ways.
Oh.
That's really interesting. I didn't imagine that it would be possible to learn that, but then when you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, that would be, I could do a bit better at that if I could write my remembered stuff down so that I could sort of make it look like it looked when I was given it, kind of thing. If I have to regurgitate it by saying it, I'd find that really hard because as I was saying it would sort of like wipe out.
So the main technique people use is to create memory palaces. So they'll have things in their mind like their house or a route that they walk all the time, and they'll remember 50 different things on that route. And then each card, for example, on the deck will be represented by a different person or action or something like that. And they'll place those things as a scene in the different locations. So it might be, in my living room, I see Taylor Swift eating a trumpet, and Taylor Swift represents the King of Hearts and the trumpet represents, the Six of Diamonds, and the eating represents a different one. And so once they've made images, all they have to then do is walk through the house again, see their image again.
So every piece in the image,
it
is a piece of information.
It's not ready, Margaret.
I feel like I'd run out of stuff. Like I'd be like, my house is over. There's no more space in my house. I still have 50 cards to go.
A lot of the top people will have they will go on when they go on a holiday. They'll go to literal palaces and castles and walk around them and create multiple different memory palaces.
I see.
Wow. Yeah. And before each competition, they have to go in their mind and clear out their memory palaces so it doesn't have old things attached to it.
Yeah, so that's what I'd like. There'd be other stuff in there from last time. So Beth said in the chat for some more diverse characters, someone whose first language is not English, and the interesting language things that would ensue there, which would be good. But also that she knows someone who's blind and plays cricket by using a bowl with a bell inside. Gosh.
You could do blind archery. They put a bell on top of the target and they have a string and they pull the string and ring the bell.
Oh gosh, so you know where the target is by the sound.
By the sound.
Well, I have seen somebody with
coming from.
Me neither. I would find that really hard to use, especially if the ball, in cricket, because it's coming towards you.
Ooh.
So you have to listen, hear that sound is coming closer. I'd be shocking at that.
You can test that one. Just lie down in a room and see what happens when there's a mosquito in the dark.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh yeah, I have no idea where it is. It's
No,
everywhere at once.
There it is. Got it.
But everyone does that, don't they? Nobody knows where the mosquitoes are in the dark.
I think mosquitoes' sounds are weird like that, aren't they? That you're not supposed to be able to hear where they are.
Just by the way, on the surreal front, very early in the story reading, it was still light outside, I saw a possum walking along the gutter of the neighbour's shed. And I was about to go, oh, there's a possum, but I didn't. I restrained. So
Unlike
when-
Dad, who was going at the cat.
Yeah,
in
he was at
Tegan's
Tegan's
shop.
cat.
Well, it was funny. It went right across the top of the screen above our head the first
It
time.
was, I
And
saw
then
the
the next
first
time,
one.
this
The
little
second-
head popped up in front.
I thought it was very good because there was the cat in the story, so I thought.
Yeah, it
Tegan's
was
cat
pretty
like-
appropriate, except that
Yeah.
Tegan's cat wasn't like jumping down and smashing things or anything.
Oh, by the way, Elizabeth, what have you got your camera on? Have you got a laptop or a phone that you're using for your camera?
Yeah, it's a laptop.
A laptop, because I was wondering how it was, moving, because occasionally during the story it would move. And when I checked a few facts with Alice in Wonderland, and when I looked it up, you Google these things, and up popped Alice in Wonderland syndrome. I said to Barry, there's a thing called Alice in Wonderland syndrome.
Really?
You're rubbish.
What is it?
It's like in the story, I'm rubbish. And no, there really, really is. And that involves things like having time seem to race and time, things in slow motion.
Oh, right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And they also get like magnification, in the sense that something's way bigger than it is, or
Sort of
something's way
zooming in
smaller.
and stuff. Oh,
wow.
wow.
And they also get like visual disturbance. So apparently for children, that's usually caused by encephalitis. So that makes sense. And adults, people with migraine, get those.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Like some of the things
Yeah,
happen with
but
migraine.
it was odd because, we've got our little thing, and you're reading your story, and there's kind of semi-surreal fictional things happening, and occasionally
The camera was zooming in on
it.
it. You were like, oh no, I've got this Alice in Wonderland.
Oh no, I shouldn't have coloured in the flamingos.
Oh, something's
That's
happening.
because it's on my knees.
It's actually being used as a laptop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It actually is. Oh,
That's
Wibbly
right.
wobbly. It's a wibbly wobbly laptop. So there are people that actually experience wibbly wobbly timey-wimey. Now that's
right, yes. Real wibbly wobbly
Well,
timey
there you
well,
go. We need wibbly wobbly timey wimey in the story
so.
ward.
Yeah, I will look into this Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland, next story. Go.
No,
In that direction,
Sarah,
obviously.
Alice Cooper in Wonderland.
I love it.
There was some 70s rock in there
You
for
can
sure.
offer chickens, you can have clowns will eat you and all sorts of things like that.
Well, I think you should have that Cooper in brackets, so it could be an alternative. I'm going to go with the traditional. You can
Alice
go with
Cooper.
the funky way out psychedelic. Yeah.
It'd be a horror story.
Sounds like you're turning it into a Halloween one for October.
Ah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Alice Cooper
And
in
we will be
Wonderland.
close to Halloween for our next story. So it's because of Halloween things. Although I do like to keep them as funny Halloween rather than actually trying to scare anybody.
Yes. Oh no, we don't do scary. We do laugh at it.
I don't write horror.
No. Yeah. Elizabeth, do I spy trackies?
Yep.
Is wearing trackies.
Oh, nutmeg.
Is that appropriate for sports, wearing trackies?
Yeah,
Yes.
of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you're
Oh,
like
good.
warm up gear on. Like,
Yeah,
let's see
that's
when
what it is.
She's warmed up for cat patting.
Yeah, cat petting sport.
Captive wear.
Especially with cats that don't like to be patted.
Then there's also the
Trying to get
marathon
cat-
event, which is
What's
when a
the
cat sits on your
marathon?
lap and you've got to see how long you can
You're
stay
trying to
there.
stay there.
Or whatever.
No, you
Would you
never be able
bet-
to use my cat. I would lose every time.
Yeah, actually, that's a good.
Yeah, what if the cat gets off?
That's
got a
right.
cat
You
that's
also
not-
lose, you know?
My cat would never sit there.
So it's a team sport between you and your cat.
It is.
The
Yeah.
cat's got to
Yeah, I
stay
need
and you've got to
I
sit.
need a Seb.
Yeah.
I need a Seb to be able to do it right.
I just thought of a funny sport I saw a documentary on.
Yeah.
Frog jumping.
Slow bike race.
What was that?
Frog
Slow
jumping.
I
bike
can't remember
race.
what they call it, but it's basically frog jumping. So people will get their frogs and they'll train them as much as they can. It's more
Yeah.
training themselves, I think.
Yeah.
But basically they'll start at one spot and they have to try, they have 3 jumps and they've got to try and get the frog to go straight because that's when you're most likely to get the furthest. Because if it goes side to side, they don't get as far. There's this big thing in America, and they had a documentary about following it and the different families who had frog jumping in the family, and one guy wanted to win because he's the only family member for like 6 generations in his family who haven't won one of these. But then there was the newcomer who was this like 10-year-old kid who ended up winning, and it's like this huge thing.
That's cute. Well, that's actually a nice thing, rather than kind of go with the weird sport thing again, but like not living up to family expectations or family expectations.
And when you have like something that runs in the family, and so you're expected to carry it on, and you're really not into it. Yeah.
Bad puns. You could put bad puns in. They're always fun.
Bad puns. Okay. We'll have somebody punny.
Introduce that thing.
I wonder whether I'll have to see if I can find some examples of this sort of thing happening. But if I was to have a character with English as their second language, like accidental puns, where other people are going, oh, you made a pun, but they might not realise because they might not know the other meaning of the word.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Ways they sometimes describe things when they forget words. Like, I don't know if this actually happened or if it's someone just thought it would be funny and made it as a joke, but it was, there was a man whose English was his second language. He's in America in a hotel and saw a mouse, and he forgot the word for mouse. So he went to concierge and said, you know Tom and Jerry? Jerry's in my room.
A nice fictional reference.
Right.
That's actually pretty cute.
Yeah.
That's a good way to
it's very good.
To resolve not knowing what to call a mouse.
Yeah.
But yeah, describing things, sort of like describing rather than knowing the word for something. I'm looking for the sucker upper thing.
Yeah.
As a surgical assistant to be like, so the mini ice cream scoop, yes. Or the claw thing. Yep. There you go.
All right. Well, that's good for topics, I think.
Yep.
So we've settled on a later one next time because your daylight saving will have come in. So 6:30 on the 9th of October. For bad puns and Alice in Wonderland things at the zoo, perhaps.
Wonderful.
Oh, for a bad pun, I don't know if this counts as a pun, but Malice in Wonderland. If you're going with Alice Cooper and like Halloween.
That would be cute. That's a good title.
That would cover the Alice Cooper with a guitar very nicely.
I'll write that down just in case.
I like your hat, Sarah.
You like my hat? It's a safe, very safe hat.
Looks very safe.
Don't hit your head when you stand up in your tiny room.
Yeah.
I might, but it will be okay. But if I hit it, does Lloyd need a third new helmet? Maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I won't hit my head. I don't usually hit my head, but Lloyd does hit his head. Maybe he should be wearing a helmet when he's at the desk.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back in October for some more. And thanks for all your good surreal and sporty outfits and things. That's very good.
Thank you. Very punny.
Yeah. See you later, everyone.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you, Sarah, over
See ya.
there.
Bye.
Say hello to Lloyd.
I will. Yeah, he's great. There you go. There's the disembodied way.